I want to start really by thanking the chair and the committee staff. You were extremely helpful in working with us to cut 4 bills down to 2 bills and to really narrow the scope in ways that I think are highly beneficial. So thank you very, very much. Mr. Chair and members, I'm here to present SB 1277, which would add the requirement of a supplemental EIR to a project proposed in my district that I believe will have local, state, national, and indeed international impacts on health and safety. In June of 2015, I had constituents come to me with growing concerns about a proposal to ship large quantities of coal from a new port terminal planned on City of Oakland land adjacent to the Port of Oakland. It had been described as a bulk terminal to ship commodities from the United States to overseas. Mentioned specifically were commodities like corn, scrap metal, iron ore, and windmills. When the City of Oakland entered into a contract with a private developer for a 66-year lease to develop the base, they did not put any restrictions on the types of commodities. However, they had been given, the community had been given both verbal and written comments to the effect that coal was not being considered because there was concern about it, because the Port of Oakland, separate from this project, had turned down a contract to transport coal just the year before. So a year later, it turned out that, in fact, the project proposal is to transport and ship up to 10 million tons of coal from the state of Utah every year to the terminal in West Oakland. I had been, and I think most of the individuals here today, very supportive of the city's plans for a bulk terminal, and still do support a bulk terminal for jobs and economic development, as long as it doesn't include coal. My great concern is for the environmental and health impact that coal would have on my constituents. Not only, let me say, the constituents of Oakland, who I'm very concerned about, but also all the communities through which these coal trains would travel every day. So, but in terms of West Oakland, the community where the facility has been located has been declared an environmentally disadvantaged community by Cal EPA due to its very high asthma rates and pollution levels. We know that West Oakland residents breathe air that contains 3 times the amount of particulate matter than other parts of the Bay Area. They are 2.5 times more likely to get cancer, and they have the highest asthma rates of any neighborhood in Alameda County. SB 1277 would simply require a public agency with discretionary authority over a project to export coal to conduct a supplemental EIR, looking at the impacts of coal, the cumulative impacts on that neighborhood, and looking for whatever, mitigations. The initial EIR in this project was conducted over 10 years ago. It did not analyze the environmental impact of coal because that wasn't on the table. The scope of the project has now changed. There was a supplemental EIR in 2012, but that didn't look at coal either because coal was not on the table at that time. Given the fact that the project has significantly changed, we believe that it requires an additional level of review. And I would ask for you to join me in making sure that that happens so that we can protect the residents and workers of this particular community, as well as all the communities that would be impacted by the transport of coal. With me today, I have Irene Gutierrez, a senior attorney at Earth Justice, George Torgan, the managing attorney at San Francisco Baykeeper, Margaret Gordon, the founder of the West Oakland Indicators Project, Derek Muhammad, the Secretary-Treasurer of ILWU, Local 10, and Dr. Bart Ostro, former Chief of the Air Pollution Epidemiology Section of Cal EPA. He's here primarily to answer any technical questions that may come up about this. So, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Can we have the supporters who will start?
Thank you.
This way.
Good afternoon. My name is Irene Gutierrez, and I'm an attorney with Earth Justice. We're an environmental law organization, and among other things, we work to promote clean air, a healthy living environment, and government transparency. And that's why we support SB 1277. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to testify today. So I'd like to provide a little bit of context about the project that we're talking about and SB 1277, which would require environmental review for the coal port that's being proposed for West Oakland. And others at this table today will testify about the health and safety effects that coal transportation will have in Oakland, as well as other aspects of the environmental review process. So Senator Hancock has already provided a great overview of how this project has evolved over time. So there's a former military base in West Oakland by the waterfront that has been under development for several decades now. And all of the development plans for that area and all of the environmental review that's been conducted to date, there was environmental review done in 2002 and 2012. All of those documents talk about a redevelopment project that will modernize the freight infrastructure in that area, that will add warehousing and office space, that will do things like create affordable housing and add to green and sustainable jobs in the area. None of these redevelopment plans or environmental review documents mention or analyze the possibility of coal transportation through that area. So coal transportation and what that means for both the citizens of West Oakland and also the citizens that live along the rail lines coming into West Oakland. The effects of coal transportation on those communities have not been studied. So in April 2015, the public learned that the developer of the proposed coal terminal in West Oakland intended to take $53 million in public money from the state of Utah to develop a coal port. And Utah has been interested in marine shipping access in California because it's become increasingly difficult for Utah to ship its coal out of the Pacific Northwest due to community opposition to this dangerous and dirty commodity coming in through those ports. And so they've turned to the Port of Oakland and other ports in California to do that business for them. And the terminal in Oakland, if it's built, would have the largest capacity of any coal port in California. So the terminal in Oakland has the ability to ship anywhere from 9 to 10.5 million tons of coal. Currently, the Port of Stockton ships around 2 million tons of coal per year. The Port of Long Beach ships about the same amount, and the private terminal in Richmond, California ships about 1 million tons per year. So Oakland would see the largest amount of coal traffic passing through its community and being exported from its community. The lines that would serve the Port of Oakland run through a number of communities in the state. The most typical route traveled is a northern route, which comes through Sacramento, Stockton, and then on to Oakland. But there is also a southern route that these trains could take coming through the Central Valley. Transporting coal is a dirty and dangerous business. Often coal trains are mile-long trains. The coal travels in open-topped cars. So as these cars travel, they blow coal dust and particulate matter through the communities along the rail lines. And as Senator Hancock has already pointed out, West Oakland is already a heavily impacted community. It suffers from serious air quality concerns. The residents of West Oakland have poor health indicators when compared to other neighborhoods in Oakland. And others who live and work in West Oakland will testify today about the particular concerns that they have with that. So in conclusion, I'd like to point out the benefits of SB 1277. So SB 1277 would ensure that if coal terminal development goes forward, there would be robust environmental review of the effects of transporting and storing coal in West Oakland. It would require environmental review of issues that are currently unstudied, like the air pollution and environmental effects of coal transportation, and how coal transportation affects the state's greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals. It would not ban coal transportation, it would just require further study and enforceable mitigations.
Thank you. Next speaker, we want everybody to speak to the merits of the bill.
Good afternoon. My name is George Torgan. I'm the managing attorney at San Francisco Baykeeper. The fundamental purposes of the California Environmental Quality Act are to inform the public and decision makers of the potential impacts of a project before it is approved. Even where there has been environmental review for a project, as is the case with the Oakland Army Base redevelopment, supplemental environmental review is required whenever there are substantial changes to a project or new information is learned that wasn't known at the time that a project was approved. Here, as you've heard from the other speakers, we have new information about substantial, significant environmental impacts related to the Oakland Army Base redevelopment, and that's because for the first time we've learned that coal is going to be a big part of this project. As of today, the City of Oakland has provided no assurances that it will undertake supplemental environmental review for this project. The project developer has taken the position that it has all the CEQA entitlements it needs. It doesn't need any further CEQA review. And it also says, hey, don't worry, there's not going to be any public health or environmental impacts from this coal terminal because we're going to use state-of-the-art technology. We're going to use covered rail cars. We're going to have a covered terminal. We're going to use covered conveyors to load the coal onto ships. Now, these things all sound great, but unfortunately, none of them are required. Some of them haven't actually been used in the real world, and they mostly just exist today as conceptual plans, not the required and enforceable mitigation measures that we would have gotten if these issues had been studied in a CEQA document and were required mitigation measures as part of the CEQA process. Ms. Gutierrez touched on some of the health impacts. I just wanted to mention some of the studies that are out there. There's a study by Jaffe from 2015, which appeared in Atmospheric Pollution Research, which found that on average, a diesel-powered coal train results in nearly twice as much fine particulate matter pollution than a diesel-powered freight train. Some of the trains that he saw in his study, which looked at coal trains passing through the Columbia River Gorge in Washington State, had visible dust plumes coming off them, and which we refer to as super dusters, which increase particulate matter concentrations by orders of magnitude above typical freight train levels. There's also the same problems during the unloading of coal trains at the terminal, loading onto ships. The science is robust that regular exposure to high particulate matter levels causes a wide range of respiratory and cardiovascular diseases, decreased lung function, aggravated asthma. Many of these studies have been conducted by Dr. Ostro, who's sitting at the table here. And we're especially concerned given the vulnerable populations that exist near the site. You already heard Senator Hancock talked about the West Oakland neighborhood, but all other vulnerable populations such as children, the elderly, and those with existing health conditions are at high risk. Coal dust also contains toxic metals such as arsenic, cadmium, chromium, lead, and mercury, which have the potential to contaminate the bay and the aquatic wildlife that depend on it. And for all these reasons, San Francisco Baykeeper strongly supports this bill and urges the committee to do so as well.
Thank you, sir. Other witnesses?
I'm Tom Butt, Mayor of Richmond, California, and I'm here today to support this bill. We in Richmond actually have quite a bit of experience with coal transport and export because, as you heard earlier, we have a privately owned terminal that has been involved in coal export for several years. During that time, we get a lot of complaints from residents along the train route, which goes right through downtown Richmond and through Richmond neighborhoods, about not only the particulate matter, the coal dust, but also the smell. And I can personally tell you that I have observed substantial coal dust collecting in city streets around the terminal location. As a matter of fact, the terminal operator routinely runs street sweeping machines to get the coal dust off the street and pays individuals with brooms to sweep it up and get it out of the nooks and crannies. A year ago, our city council adopted a resolution opposing the transport and export of coal from anywhere along the urbanized shoreline of California, and we also prohibited the city of Richmond from entering into any contracts that involved coal export from any of our publicly owned terminals. So we know what the problems are. We are stymied in our ability to regulate this locally because primarily of federal preemption, which totally controls the transport. And then, you know, there are very few state statutes and regulations that deal with this issue. So we believe that it's ripe for the state to take some responsibility for regulatory measures and environmental analysis, and we'd like to see this bill passed. Thank you.
Yeah.
Derek Mohammed, here on behalf of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union Local 10, in support of this legislation. I'd like to be very clear about something. We support the building of a marine terminal at the old Oakland Army base, but we can't support a project at the expense of the environment, at the expense of the health and safety of our workforce, and at the expense of that marginalized community that sits just adjacent to the Port of Oakland. Real quickly, I'd just like to read coal dust and some of the things that it contains, and you heard some of it earlier. Heavy metals including arsenic, lead, mercury, chromium, selenium, aluminum, barium, boron, chlorine, cobalt, nickel, and zinc. If eaten, drank, or inhaled, these toxicants can cause cancer and nervous system impacts such as cognitive deficits, developmental delays, and behavioral problems. They can also cause heart damage, lung disease, respiratory distress, kidney disease, reproductive problems, gastrointestinal illness, birth defects, and impaired bone growth in children. And so my hope is, our hope is that the city of Oakland invest its time and resources into developing jobs that won't be a detriment to the community, but a benefit to the community. And we're here pledging our full support for this legislation. We think it sends a clear message to other cities that they will be well advised to carefully consider the impacts of coal and other unclean commodities. Thank you.
Other witnesses in favor of the legislation, please?
Margaret?
You can go.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I said you could.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, I want to apologize. I'm just getting over a cold with some laryngitis, so I'll do my best here. Yeah, I've been the chief of the air pollution epidemiology section for the California Environmental Protection Agency for 25 years. I retired a year and a half ago, and now I have a position at the University of California, Davis. Basically, the coal dust is a part of PM2.5, it's called, or fine particles, which are regulated by the US EPA, California, and also there's WHO standards, World Health Organization standards. In 2001, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously that fine particles are a hazard that needs to be regulated, and it approved the standards that EPA put out. We've conducted studies in California that show strong associations between fine particles and, as was mentioned, a whole series of adverse outcomes, including premature mortality. There's very strong associations with early death from cardiovascular disease as well as respiratory disease related to fine particles. Now, there is a very good study that was mentioned in the state of Washington that does show extreme levels of fine particle increases, double the level that's usually seen from regular diesel-powered trains. And concentrations went up as high as 75 to 200 micrograms. The current standard, annual standard, is 12, and there's a 24-hour standard of 35. So these are very, very high levels. Since these particles are so small, they're 2.5 microns, a human hair is about 70 microns. These particles are very small, and they're dangerous because they can be hailed deeply into the lung. Also, since they're so small, they can travel over wider distances. They just float through the air and can travel for miles around. So given the very severe health effects of fine particles, WHO has indicated 3 million deaths a year worldwide. In California, we've already estimated 10,000 to 30,000 deaths per year from exposure to fine particles. Given that this community already is at risk, and given the expected levels of coal dust that will be in that community as well as other communities, we strongly feel that actions need to be taken to prevent coal being transported out of Oakland.
Do I start now? All right. Hi, my name is Ms. Margaret Gordon. I'm the founder and co-director of the West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project. I'm a former commissioner for the Port of Oakland. I live less than 1 mile from the Port of Oakland and also this new facility. I am an asthma victim. I have 14 grandchildren, 3 adult children, and half of us all have some kind of respiratory allergies. I do not, after 20-some years fighting to do emission reduction planning around diesel, all of a sudden now I got to spend my last years of my life, I'm almost 70, fighting now about the storage of coal. It doesn't make sense. I've been part of the process of the redevelopment of the Army base for over 20 years. Coal was not a commodity that was specified in any documents for the redevelopment of this project. And as a resident, I am totally appalled that we have to go to this extreme to get the senator to come and help us when our governor lives right in Oakland and hasn't said a word, has not came out and supported this whole issue about supporting this type of commodity. But he can't go to Paris and do all the talking, but he has not said not one thing about our health and our needs not to be impacted by this commodity. All right, and I'm not anti the project. We all need the jobs, we all need good paying jobs, but I am anti this storage of this commodity in this particular community after all these years. I have spent all these years fighting for emission reduction planning with the Port of Oakland, and they have done a very good job of reducing emissions by 70%. Now we have this coal terminal that's gonna be here, and we're gonna be mixing diesel and coal particularly together. We couldn't tell which one was what gonna kill somebody or make somebody sick. We already have families who are have had to move out the neighborhood because because their children are being sick or the adults are being sick. We have elevated COPD in our community also. We know that 1 out of 5 children between the ages of 0 and 5 end up in emergency hospital for sometime in their lifetime within 94607, 94608, and 94612. So by bringing this commodity to this community after all these years is very appalling and disturbing. Thank you.
I wanted to first apologize to the city of Emeryville. Where's Emeryville? I'm sorry, I didn't mention you. I mentioned Richmond, I mentioned Berkeley. I'm sorry, I didn't mention Emeryville. They're a city too. And I also wanted to apologize for the Oakland Unified School District, who also is a government institution as well, that has expressed their views. Colleagues, the EIR that was done originally on this project was 10 years ago. It was done under the auspices of another governmental institution. Since that time, another governmental institution took over due to the realignment, redevelopment. And then there was a supplement done in 2012 which didn't cover the issue adequately. So in my mind, we have what we call a stale EIR, an EIR that had not covered the actual project. And I think it's important to have a supplemental EIR. We could pass the buck to the City of Oakland. We could pass it to the courts or do one of those things. But I think the right thing to do is just say, we invested, and I'm kind of going to say this to anybody that allocates state funds, if they have a project, they better be very careful about the environmental clearance for those projects that they approve money for. We should request that an EIR be done. And I hope that the City of Oakland takes the message to the EIR. I would urge support for the bill. So we call the roll. This also goes to other committees as well.
The motion is do pass and refer to the Committee on Environmental Quality. Senator Bell?
Aye.
Bell, aye. Cannella? No. Cannella, no. Allen? Allen, aye. Bates? Bates, no. Gaines? Gaines, no. Galgiani? Galgiani, aye. Leyva? Leyva, aye. McGuire? McGuire, aye. Mendoza? Roth? Roth, aye. Wykowski? Aye.
Seven votes. We have 7 votes in favor, three opposed, and we got everybody here. So
Thank you so much.